My guest today is Meghan Murphy, writer and host of the Same Drugs podcast. We discuss her excommunication from feminism and the left, her dissent against trans activism, and the collapse of legacy media, particularly in Canada. Meghan is a fearless voice for truth and a fiercely independent thinker. This is a conversation I've been eager to have for a long time, and it does not disappoint. Stay tuned. Meghan Murphy, thanks for talking to me today. It's awesome to have you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, well, we talked for quite a bit before we started recording, but I've been a reader of yours for a long time, and I've this is a conversation I've been wanting to have. We're both from Vancouver originally, both escapees, yourself now in Mexico, myself in Alberta. And yeah, so I wanted to start our conversation today by talking about your break with the left, because you were a renowned feminist writer. You have been for quite a long time. And it's kind of surprising to see you now excommunicated from this. I don't know if you would define it as a group or a way of thinking or a lifestyle, but it's weird to see you kind of outside of that now. Can you talk about what led to your leaving that bubble?
Yeah, it was a lot of things. I mean, I feel like I left voluntarily. I left the left and left feminism, by choice, because I wanted freedom of thought and freedom of expression, and those are things that are not supported in the left or in feminist circles at all, despite the fact, frustratingly, that a lot of feminists like me, so the kind of feminist who's been critical of gender identity ideology, not the kind of feminist who says trans women are women, these women have been silenced and shut down and censored and threatened in like the worst ways for speaking out against gender identity ideology, so have been forced to fight for free speech. But most of those women, not all of those women, but most of those women still won't support free speech and still don't like it when you stray from feminist ideology, when you're critical of the mantras or the ideas or the politics that you're not supposed to be critical of. And I just found it stifling, but also I just lost respect for that. Like, I lost respect for people who couldn't see the hypocrisy in their own behaviors and views. I couldn't have respect for a person who would say free speech for me, but not for thee. And so there was that. And there's so much of it that's so silly and stupid and reactive. And actually the response to Taylor Swift has been a really good example of that. And it feels silly to talk about Taylor Swift because, and all, I wrote, as you know, like 2 articles about Taylor Swift recently. And for a long time, I've been completely baffled by the Taylor Swift phenomenon. Like, I don't find her interesting. I don't think her music is interesting. I don't enjoy it. To me, it's not good. It's just blah. Like, her entire thing is blah. Like, who cares? Her personality is blah. Like, her music is blah. Like, there's nothing interesting about her. She doesn't have an interesting story. She came from a very privileged background, and her dad got her a record deal or whatever. And and then she was manufactured and packaged into stardom, and she's become politicized. And that's partly the fault of the right for determining that she's like a Democrat psyop. Maybe she is, I have no idea. And part of that has been because, in defense, progressives and feminists, and this seems to be the entire politic of the left and feminists nowadays, is to just be what they aren't. Like, I'm not MAGA, so we love Taylor Swift, right? And
Right.
I'm like, this is so stupid. This is the stupidest way to form your politics and to determine what people and ideas and parties you support. Is just like, we're not that.
Yeah.
So I guess we're all this. Oh my God, there's a really loud car outside. I don't know if you can hear it.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. Yeah, it's background music. I like it. So
Mexico is a bit chaotic, so it's
yeah,
hard to control.
yeah.
It's so loud out there. It's crazy.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's indicative of everything else that we're seeing, right? Like everything has been politicized. If you drink Coke, then you're part of this team. If you drink Pepsi, you're part of the other. It's like
Or Bud Light.
right. Tribalism has kind of encompassed or enveloped everything, right?
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
it's, even down to pop singers. And, in my, I think you and I kind of come from a similar era, right? Like you're a fan of 90s hip hop. That's my era too, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like where we come from, that the art and music that was created during that period meant something. It actually meant something. And I think what you're picking up on, and it's the same thing that I've picked up on. I have a 13-year-old, so I'm privy to all of the horrible, awful shit that is coming down from the on high, right? And I just think what it is that it's empty. It's vapid. There's
Yeah.
nothing there, and it's art and music and film are always reflective of the state of the culture. And that's
Yeah.
where we are, is that there's nothing there. It doesn't mean anything. And so we're kind of in this weird place where virtue signaling has replaced actual virtue, right? Where you don't have to apply any effort into being a good person anymore. As long as you make the signals, then you are a good person. Oh, I see it. You got so much
This is
happening over
it.
there.
Oh, she's taken a tumble on the pillow here, and now she's trying to drink my water. Sorry. This is Emma. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah,
No
I mean,
sweat.
Emma, no. Yeah, I mean, I just like I agree with you so much that in the 90s, I was obsessed with 90s hip hop. I still am. And that was just like such an amazing, it's the golden era of hip hop. And it was just so innovative and creative and new. And that was all very political too, of course.
Yeah.
And hip hop and rap were kept out of the mainstream and kept out of the Grammy Awards and all of that. And, the elites and mainstream pop music didn't want to accept them. And then, of course, once it became popularized, they decided they wanted to start embracing them. And luckily, some of those guys were like, no, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We weren't invited last year. We're not coming this year either.
That's right.
But there's just it's hard to talk about because you do sound like the cliched old person where you're like, back in my days it was so much better and now everything's terrible. But I also, despite the fact that I was into music that was being created in the 90s, I was always, ever since I was a little kid, really into oldies and classic rock and funk and soul and all of that, because that music is also incredible and amazing too. Um, and now what we have is just garbage. It's just nothing, garbage. It says nothing. It doesn't move me. It doesn't make me feel joy. I love music, and so music is important to me, and that's what I wrote in the piece. And so of course I care, and it makes me sad that almost everything that's being produced and celebrated nowadays is just dull. And so, yeah, it doesn't move me in any way. And I think it's not good. And I don't understand why it's controversial to say that pop music is bad. This is the weird thing. And it goes to
Yeah.
show that people, I think, I think people really don't know what good music is anymore, at least the younger generations. Because all they've been handed is just this junk food.
Mm.
I can't even think of the names of all these, like even Drake. It's like, oh, Drake is like the most famous guy in hip hop right now. Like this is all, and Drake, like the guy who was on like the remake of Degrassi, like this guy is a dork. Like, why is this is like, he's from Toronto. Like, what is happening here? And Dua Lipa or whatever, and even Nicki Minaj and Rihanna and Beyonce. I listen to this stuff and I'm like, like this is
Yeah.
not exciting music to me. and people get so defensive, and it's really weird. And, you know, I get, you know, probably some or a lot of the women who got defensive about my pointing out that Taylor Swift was boring, they felt insulted, because I think I was a bit insulting when I was like, you know, you think that you like good music, but you don't. This isn't good music.
Yeah.
Try harder.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's sorry that there's nothing better being offered to you, but that doesn't make this good. And the fact that people lose their minds, you know, if somebody says that they think the Beatles suck, I think that they suck, but I'm not going to lose my mind over it. I'm just going to be like, okay, well, you don't know what good music sounds like, and you probably have no idea what the Beatles have produced. You're probably, when I say the Beatles, you're probably thinking like love, 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 which is still a
Yeah.
beautiful song, but you know,
Yeah.
you probably know 3 of the songs that everybody else knows, and you don't understand the depth of their music.
Right. Yeah, but again, it's indicative of a period in time, right? Like, I mean, for me, I like the Beatles, but I'm more of a Zeppelin fan myself, right?
I
But
mean, I love Zeppelin too.
yeah,
That's,
right,
yeah,
right. But
obviously Zeppelin's amazing.
it's that entire era of music and culture, right?
Yeah.
There were real things happening, and I feel like the political atmosphere, instead of the art kind of railing against the social and I mean the obvious social and political illnesses that we're currently dealing with, it's been absorbed by it, and that's what we see. We have Taylor Swift because Taylor Swift is of the machine. She's not pushing against the machine. She's not creating art that,
Yeah.
you know, rages against the machine, should we say, right? But
She's not trying to fuck with the machine.
right,
Yeah. And a
she's
lot of
of the
those
machine. She
guys
is.
and women were.
Yeah, sorry, I just turned my light on because now the sun's going down on me. But
Now the sun's changed. Like the Beatles, it was, I mean, some people said in response to me talking about how, you know, it's weird that people really, really lose their minds over Taylor Swift. And
Mhm.
that was not my main point, that, you know, all these teenage girls are screaming and having convulsions over Taylor Swift. And people were like, well, that's not the first time this has happened, because obviously that happened with like Elvis. And,
Right.
you know, some people pointed out, oh, well, that happened with the Beatles. And I was like, yeah, but you know what the Beatles did in response to that? They stopped touring ever
Yeah.
again. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they were so frustrated and unhappy with those circumstances. They would do these huge concerts, and these screaming fans were so loud and distracting that you know, you couldn't even hear the music anymore. So it
Right.
wasn't about the music, it wasn't about the art, it was just about this hysterical reaction to them, and that's not what they wanted. They wanted to produce music, and they wanted to produce art, and they wanted what they did to be about that.
Yeah.
And so they stopped touring, and after they stopped touring is when, of course, they produced all of their best albums. So it's a completely good comparison, but not in the way that these people wanted it to be, because
Right.
Taylor Swift is actively cultivating this obsession with her. You know, this is her strategy. She's cultivated this relationship with her fans where they're constantly obsessing over what she's doing and looking for these Easter eggs and clues in her lyrics and following every single thing that she does and every single thing that she puts out there. So they think they have this relationship with her. They think they're friends with her, but of course they're not. And I just think that's really kind of sick. Like that
Yeah.
relationship has always made me uncomfortable, because inevitably, if you're a public person, people are going to think they have a relationship with you when they don't,
Yeah.
which is, it can be nice in some ways, but it's not when people start to, you know, treat you like a celebrity. Like I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
I feel uncomfortable. Like I want people to know that I'm just like a normal person, because I am
Yeah.
just a normal person. And I it's weird when people think that they know you when they don't, but she does that on purpose, and I don't respect that. And so for people knowing this, to pretend that she's this super authentic, she's just a normal, you know, this is just, she's just being herself. It's like, no, she's not. She's cultivating this chaos and
Yeah.
this hysteria and this obsession around her on purpose for profit. I don't
Yeah.
respect that. Why do I have to respect it? Oh, she's so successful. She made a bunch of money. I don't care. That's not
Yeah.
ethical. Like some rich people, I'm sure, did it ethically. Most, I think, did not, probably. But,
Yeah.
I have to respect somebody because they made a lot of money? No, that's never been my values, ever. I sort of wish it were. I'd probably have more money, but
Yeah. Well, I think it points to something bigger, right? And I think it has to do with, we've always had celebrity idols, right? Like, I mean, you talk about the Beatles, right? Like, I mean, they were the biggest band on earth. They couldn't go anywhere without people fainting, right? And they pulled themselves out of the spotlight and, like you said, created some of their best work. But I think what's happening now is that we've lost our spiritual base. And so we turn all sorts of different things into idols now, not just celebrities and pop stars and stuff, right? I mean, talk about transgenderism. I mean, that has become a religion. I
yeah,
watched you take video of people standing outside of your hotel, and I can't remember if you were on the roof at one point or something, and these protesters were coming toward you. Look, I'm a 41-year-old man. I'm 220 pounds. I've been boxing for most of my life. I've been grappling for the other half of my life. I would be terrified if a bunch of dudes in dresses were running at me, screaming in my face. But it's the psychosis that you see in their minds is religious fervor, right? It's like you have tested their faith. I mean, do you see the same thing? How it's almost like a religious faith that
yeah, of
that's
course.
that's replaced rational thought?
Yeah, so that what you were talking about was in San Francisco, and it was really scary. And what happened was I was speaking at a conference, the Women's Declaration International annual conference, and it was taking place in a hotel in like the business district, I think, of San Francisco. I'm a little bit familiar with San Francisco, but not super familiar. Um, and there was a huge protest down on the streets below. Huge. They shut down the whole street in the business district on like a Saturday, and the cops just let them do that. They kind of half-assedly protected the hotel a little bit, but they let them shut down the whole street for the entire day until it got dark. And they were screaming and they had signs and they were harassing drivers, and, harassing the hotel staff and of course harassing anybody who came outside. Um, and we were up on this. It was sort of like a bridge from, I think it was the Chinese Cultural Center or something like that. And it connected to the hotel, to the big room and area where the conference was happening. And it had been gated off. There was this huge, big gate and doors, and it had been locked down and you couldn't get through. And they'd done that for security purposes. So we were just kind of standing around out there, doing some photos and doing some video and chatting and taking a break from the conference. And we were with a couple of guys, and all of a sudden, one of the guys screams like, "Run, they're coming." And I
Oh,
turn around and there's like 8 men in black running at us with their trans signs. And I had to run. I've never had to run away from anyone before. It was very scary. I had to run, and they had, if that guy hadn't had yelled, we didn't see them coming, and they'd scaled the wall to get over to come and chase us down and attack us. And he went and fought them off, and they, threw a bottle at their head and were attacking him and things like that. And then the security guys came out. But yeah, I would have been in really big trouble if I hadn't been alerted to that and run away. I had to, take the stairs 2 by 2 and run into the building and hide. It was so scary. It was totally, have had nightmares about it since then, because
I
I
bet.
just I just know what would have happened if they had caught up with us. These people are totally psychotic and unhinged, and it is like a religion. It's like they're in a cult. Like they're completely, you know, they've convinced themselves of this strange ideology where trans women are women, and anyone who says otherwise, or anyone who challenges or questions the idea that a child should be transitioned, which is just, it should be illegal, right?
Yeah.
It's sterilizing kids, it's destroying their bodies for life. And never mind the mental impact of telling a little kid that actually they're born in the wrong body, and you may have been born a boy, but I guess you're a girl on the inside, so now you're a girl and we're going to pretend you're a girl. And never mind the impact on girls who are now being forced to share change rooms with naked men,
Hmm.
with their genitals out, and be subject to predation, and not be allowed to say anything, or if they do say anything, be accused of transphobia. But they've convinced themselves that we're these evil, dangerous, violent people, and meanwhile these people who are going after us are really dangerous, violent, bad people. You're chasing down and trying to beat up women at a feminist conference who are talking about women's rights. Like, you're the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, you'd think that would be obvious.
Yeah, it's grotesque behavior, but it's like almost it is. I mean, it's religious in a sense where it what they're doing in their mind supersedes all, moral, ethical boundaries, right? Like they're free to break those boundaries because of a religious line that you're crossing, or a dogmatic line that you're crossing, which, what always confused me was how transgenderism and feminism somehow met, because you would think that they would be naturally in opposition to one another, considering it's men mostly
Mm-hmm.
transitioning to become cosmetically, I guess. I mean, they can't be, there's no I mean, it's impossible for them to be biological women. So cosmetic women, who a large amount of them are actually just, just have a sexual fetish. They have autogynephilia. You would think that that feminists of all people would be the ones to kind of be ringing the alarm and pulling up the
Yeah.
drawbridge, right? Because it's like how was that connection made?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all feminists. The first people to ever push back against transgenderism were feminists in the 70s, like Germaine
Mm,
Greer. Gloria Steinem did back then, although she's retracted since under pressure. Robin Morgan, Janice Raymond, of course, who wrote The Transsexual Empire. Those women were not having it. And this first became a fight within the feminist movement, really, or it really began to heat up in any case during the Michigan Women's Festival, which was this long-standing women-only music festival that happened every year for, oh gosh, I wish I could remember, decades and decades and decades. And it ended a few years ago as a result of this rift,
mm,
and these attacks on the organizers and the women who said no men, and that means men who identify as women too, and then the trans women who just persisted in attacking and sort of forcing themselves in and forcing the issue, and probably some of their female allies. So there was always those women, a lot of the lesbian feminists and the radical feminists who said no, and who tried to raise the alarm. And of course, nobody paid attention. Nobody listened, and people are catching on now, which is great, but it's too late almost. Um, and then, of course, there was all the mainstream feminists. And so, when conservatives or people who are just learning about this issue say, where are all the feminists? I do get it. But of course, it's maddening because I've been talking about this for many years, and there's other women who've been fighting this for many years as well, and we got no support and no platforms, and we could have really used the support of these people who are now saying, how come none of the feminists said anything sooner? But people like, well, now, people like Gloria Steinem and people like Jessica Valenti and people like Rebecca Solnit, and like, all these Democrat adjacent feminists who also, also lost their minds at critiques of the birth control pill, and also who say that sex work is work and prostitution should be legalized, and who say that maybe BDSM and pornography and strip clubs can be liberating for women. I mean, these are all the women that I was always critical of and arguing with from the get-go. That's my entire career has been criticizing third wave feminism and these ideas that I thought were so anti-woman and anti-feminist and not conducive to genuine female empowerment and sovereignty. But those are the women who get jobs in nonprofits and who get the columns in, in the past, all the mainstream magazines and newspapers and things like that. And the rest of us were always kind of sidelined. So I've sort of always been like a bête noire in feminism, I suppose, for a whole wide variety of issues. And of course, things got exponentially worse when I started speaking about gender identity. The leftists and the feminists who'd been coming after me over the prostitution issue, for example, calling me a SWERF, a sex work exclusionary feminist, because I didn't think that prostitution was good for women, and I don't think it should be legal to pay for sex or to pimp out women or to run a brothel. But those people all were right on board with the trans ideology, and so also started calling me a TERF, and that's when I was, really canceled. That issue, hilariously, this idea that men could somehow be women was the thing that really caught on. And really led to my break from the left and from feminism. And again, that was in part, it wasn't just the mainstream feminists or the third wave feminists that I was rejecting and being canceled by. It was the radical feminists too, because I just found the ideological limitations were still there. They sort of sounded different, but there's just so much pressure to stay in line, and people start to act like they own you a bit, and then when you step out of line, they try to destroy you. Oh, Meghan said this thing, and that's not what we think, so let's destroy her and ensure that she can't make a living ever again, and can't find an audience, and let's call her a bunch of misogynist names and call her like a ball palmer, and she's just here to like suck up to men. And it's so funny what feminists will say to you as feminists.
It's wild, right?
You're only saying this because you want men to like you. It's like as if anything I have ever said has been said so that people like me. Like, give me a break.
For sure. And as a guy who grew up, like I said, being a bit of a knuckle dragging gorilla, being a feminist in the first place, a feminist writer is not exactly like, for weaker men, knuckle dragging idiots. That's not exactly the calling card for, but
no, but I think the feminists think that because, I've rejected the left and I've rejected the identity of a feminist, which doesn't mean, I think I probably still am a feminist. I just don't like the labels because I find that it is limiting.
For sure.
But I think they think that because I started sort of branching out and questioning feminist ideology and talking to a lot more men on my podcast, many of whom don't like feminism, which is fine. I mean, modern feminism would appear so stupid to any thinking person, I think. So I think because of that kind of thing, they've all sorts of things that I said, my dislike for Taylor Swift, my pointing out that red meat is good for you, all these things. They're like, you're just sucking up to men. And I'm like, okay, but red meat's good for you.
Well, I think what you're pointing at here is that, feminism, again, is a component of a larger overarching dogma, right? It's
Yeah.
been absorbed by leftist ideology, right? And I'm from the left myself. I mean, I'm from fucking BC. It's impossible to be from BC and not be from the left. And I abandoned the left for the same reasons. I just saw it becoming religious in its essence. And I was like, we have to be able to explore ideas and talk to other people. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that you're just going to spend your entire life living in some, liberal utopia where you never explore ideas outside of your ideology. And essentially that's what they want, because it does operate like a cult, right?
Yeah.
And so, with feminism, I mean, feminism has always been on the left. I don't know. You probably maybe know of conservative feminists, but I've never heard of one. And so it was a natural marriage for feminism to get absorbed into that leftism that we saw kind of rise from 2010 onward, right? And largely in response to the Bush Cheney regime. That's kind of how I saw it enter into the cultural milieu, right? But now you find it's interesting, because I find people like you all over the place, from every, from every I don't know how to define it, like group or other outside outlying ideology. There's always like the dissenters or the detractors that have kind of broken away and said, okay, fuck you, I'm doing my own thing,
Yeah.
because you guys are all crazy now. And you can see that like everywhere, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
center is filling up full of those people like yourself, people like me to a lesser degree, because of just having the courage to not go along with it. And I think that's kind of what it preys on, right? Is it preys on people's fear of being alone and fear of being ostracized from their communities, right? So,
Yeah, totally. And that's like a human thing. I mean, that's totally normal. I mean, we've evolved to be afraid of being kicked out of the tribe, because being kicked out of the tribe means death. If
right.
you're ostracized from the tribe, you die. So that fear makes sense. It doesn't mean it's right, of
Mhm.
course. This thing where people pile on, because this is, they've determined this is what we think, and if somebody says different, then they're a bad person and they're an enemy, and we should destroy them, rather than actually consider their views or engage in the conversation. I mean, that's obviously an unethical, toxic practice. But
Right.
that fear is human, unfortunately. I mean, for for us.
Well, did you have that fear when you first started to take steps to kind of disassociate yourself with the circles that you were in?
I think at that point, I had been canceled so many times that I had developed a really thick skin.
Right.
The first time I was canceled, I almost had, a mental, emotional breakdown. This was in 2015, when there was this big petition that was started by Canadian leftists and the sex work is work people, mainly out of Ontario, but some BCers got on board too, of course. Um, who tried to have me fired from my part-time job as an editor, and podcaster at rabble.ca, which was this leftist news media site. It still exists. It's not, I don't know that they're doing very well, but
Mm.
they're funded by unions. They're a labor site. They're an NDP advocate site, and media outlet. And that fit with everything I believed at the time, back in 2013, 2014 kind of thing. I had been a lifelong NDP voter. I was a socialist, I was a feminist, but I strayed from the acceptable positions
Mhm.
on certain things, mostly prostitution, and then eventually again I started pushing back against the gender identity thing. So they tried to have me fired, and there was this mass campaign to have me fired, and my employer wouldn't let me respond, so I just had to sit there and like watch it all happen, and watch all these people say all these horrible things about me online, on Twitter, on Facebook. And I couldn't say anything, and I wasn't fired, but I wasn't fired, and all my coworkers ostracized me at work. So I felt like there was this silent bullying campaign. It's hard to work when nobody will speak with you or engage with you or work with you.
Yeah.
So I kind of just kept doing my thing, but it was horrible and miserable and sad, like you have kind of hurt feelings because some of these people are your friends and they're treating you like you're this horrible person and persona non grata. And at one point I wrote an article criticizing the adoption of terms like menstruator and pregnant person by organizations like Planned Parenthood. I was like,
Right.
surely, of all people, Planned Parenthood knows who a woman is. And I was like, menstruator. It's like, this is such an offensive, dehumanizing term. I'm not a menstruator, I'm a woman. So I
Right.
wrote this article and it went up at rabble.ca. And then the next day it was taken down, and nobody told me that it was taken down or why it was taken down. And I tried to contact my editor and I was like, what's going on? Why was it? And nobody would even respond to me, like, to tell me
Right.
that it was taken down. And finally, because, they were giving me the silent treatment, my coworkers, my editor, giving me the silent treatment.
So just to interject here for
Yeah,
people,
sorry.
like as a writer, your relationship with your editor is like highly intimate, right? Like as intimate as a working relationship can get, because your editor has to know your writing style. You have to understand what the editor is looking for. There's a lot of back and forth and back, like when you're writing and working with an editor, right? And so the fact that you couldn't even get your editor to talk to you is, yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. And this situation, I was kind of, it was what I was publishing was just going up on the site as was, like the edits that they would do would be very minimal. But
Right.
yeah, in general, if you're working with an editor, you're going back and forth and back and forth, back and forth, and you're agreeing and disagreeing on various things. And they're usually like an enormous help to your writing if they're a good editor, right? But yeah, so these are like my coworkers. Like it was just, and this was a group of people who were heavily involved in the labor movement and behaving in these really unethical ways at work. But yeah, so eventually the publisher emailed me and said they had to take it down because I used transphobic language or something like that. And I was like, what was the transphobic language? And nobody would tell me. It was just ridiculous. And so eventually I just quit, and explained that I was quitting because they were censoring me for making very fair and rational arguments against unnecessary and dehumanizing language. And I know what a woman is, and you know what a woman is, and we should be able to say so. But so after that, then, there was endless further cancellation campaigns. And I think I just really developed a thick skin. I mean, I've always been willing to stand up and say something different. And that doesn't mean that it's not scary. Like, I think a lot of people think, oh, you're brave, you must, why are you like this? And they think maybe you were born different than they were, and I'm not a courageous person, so I can't stand up. And you're a brave person and you can stand up. But the reason that I'm brave and courageous is because I do these things. Like the way that you become brave and courageous is by doing brave and courageous acts. And it's not just, some people may be built different, or I've always been rebellious and argumentative. And I've always kind of been different, I've sort of gone my own way. But yeah, I mean, anybody can be a brave person if you do a brave thing. And that's what builds confidence and courage. Like it makes you feel courageous when you do courageous things. You literally become a courageous person. I used to be terrified of public speaking.
Yeah.
When I was in university, I would shake and sweat and just, I would do everything I could to avoid public speaking. And now, of course, I have to do public speaking all the time.
Yeah.
And I still do get a bit nervous, but not nearly as nervous as I used to be. And the way that I overcame that fear and that nervousness, I can watch myself at the first event that I did in Vancouver on gender identity. This was in 2019, I think, at the Vancouver Public Library. Well, I remember when I was doing it, my hands were shaking and I was sweating and I was so scared. And you think everybody can see that, but when I watched back, I didn't look nervous. I think I sort of seemed overly serious and monotone because I didn't know how to like relax and be natural under those stressful circumstances. But what I did was I just kind of faked it. Like I go up and speak and pretend that I'm a person who's comfortable speaking. And
Right.
eventually you do kind of become a person who's comfortable speaking,
Yeah, kind
it's
of what I'm doing
you
at this very
you just
moment. I'm
keep
working on it. Yeah.
yeah, you just keep doing it, and
Yeah.
you do things that you're afraid of or that you feel uncomfortable with, and eventually you kind of are able to push past. I mean, this is
Yeah.
like any psychologist or therapist would probably be like, yeah, duh. The way to
Yeah.
overcome agoraphobia is not to hide in your house.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as a consequence, you've become, this big dissenting voice against the trans activism, right? I always refer to it as an agenda, and I guess it is an agenda to a degree, but it's mostly informed by activists, and many of whom I'm not even convinced are actually trans themselves, and that's
No.
that's that's always been the concerning thing for me is like, here in Alberta, Danielle Smith and the Conservatives recently passed a bill to outlaw hormone therapy and puberty blockers for children and sexual and sex reassignment surgery, which again I think is a misnomer because you can't reassign sex. You're just cutting off a dick or
Yeah.
pretending to make a vagina, right? But
She was very careful in her language, which I understand. She's a
right,
politician and she's just trying to get something done. And I think what she's trying to get done is very important. So,
right, and so
but
but now there's this uproar in Canada about, well, the accusation is, that Danielle Smith and the conservatives hate trans children, which
yeah.
again is a misnomer to me because
These signs that say like Danielle Smith or whoever's supporting her,
yeah,
you have blood on your hands, you're killing trans kids. Like it's hyperbolic, but it's so
it's also
that's a
ironic.
dangerous thing to say.
Yeah,
Like
but it's
you're telling children in Canada or minors or youth, teens, whatever, that this woman, the premier of Alberta, is trying to kill you because she's saying that you can't take puberty blockers and hormones or get, these cosmetic surgeries when you're underage.
well, not only that, but it's ironic because no, actually, trans activists, the blood is on your hands
Mm-hmm.
because now you have all of these disfigured children who are
Mm-hmm.
going to become adults. And maybe some of them might be happy with their mutilated bodies, but they're not going to be happy with all of the complications that come with that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And
I-
so, please, no, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, no, I agree with you. It's these puberty blockers, hormones. I mean, as I said earlier, this is it sterilizes kids. They're destroying their bodies for life. They're ensuring that when these kids become adults, they can't have orgasms. They won't have a normal relationship, a normal intimate relationship, or a sexually pleasurable relationship. They won't be able to reproduce, and their bodies are going to be they're destroyed for life. It sounds harsh to say, but it's like these people are going to be freaks.
Yeah.
Their genitals are mangled, the girls' breasts have been removed, they're women who have weird splotchy hair on their faces. You're not developing in a healthy, normal way. There's all sorts of other impacts in terms of bone development and brain development that nobody talks about. I mean, you need to go through puberty in order to become a healthy adult in a wide variety of ways, not just in terms of the development of your reproductive system and genitalia and all of that. They're just destroying these kids' lives, and they're minors. They have no idea what
Yeah.
it means to be an adult, what it means to reproduce, what it means to have an orgasm. They have no idea what they're going to want when they're 30 or 40 or 50 years old. It's so cruel and unconscionable, and you're right. I mean, these and of course all of this will lead to mental health issues when
Mhm.
you become this adult with this mangled body who can't have a normal healthy sexual intimate relationship, who can't get married and have a family. Of course that's going to lead to mental health issues, and you try to turn it around and accuse people like Danielle Smith, whose policies are really just about protecting kids, who don't know any better. They're minors. You don't let them smoke, you don't let them vote, you don't let them drive cars, but they can destroy their bodies for life. No.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, like and even like, on the outside of that, like, I have a 6-year-old daughter and I get nervous. I'm in a conservative province and I get nervous about her going into the bathroom by herself because of this new acceptance that we're supposed to have where men in dresses can go into a woman's bathroom, right? And we're already kind of seeing the consequences of that, of I don't even know what you call it, quote unquote tolerance, unfolding all throughout the United States and in places in Canada where you have young girls or young women being raped or molested in a public bathroom by a man,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's like the thing that I see here is almost like these children are being sacrificed to an idol in a sense, right? Because the idol being the overarching ideology. We're sacrificing these children and saying, well, you're confused, potentially mentally ill, which I don't think most of them really are. I think they're just confused children. But what we're going to do is we're going to disfigure you permanently in the name of this ideology so that we can signal virtue or to be virtuous in accordance with the dogma that we follow. And so, can you talk about, I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but can you go a little bit further into some of the blowback that you've received for being such a powerful voice against this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the obviously you're called transphobic, you're called a bigot, you're called hateful, you're told, why can't you just accept people as they are, which is ironic because I think what the trans movement is doing is not accepting people as they are, not accepting kids as they are, telling people who are different, telling kids who feel, a girl who doesn't like feminine stuff, who maybe isn't like the other girls in some way or whatever way we think girls should be, and vice versa for boys, that there's something wrong with them when there's nothing wrong with them. I was a tomboy when I was a kid. I liked boy stuff. I didn't like girl stuff. I wanted to play with the boys and I didn't want to, wear pink and wear frilly dresses. I wanted to have adventures and be rebellious and independent. I wasn't. I was still, a kid. But the girls that I idolized were like Pippi Longstocking and um Punky Brewster and Encyclopedia Brown. I wanted to be a detective.
Right.
Um, but like what the trans movement is doing is not accepting people as they are.
Right.
I think we all know now that a lot of these kids, these girls who think they're boys or want to transition to become boys actually will turn out to be lesbians when they're older.
Right.
A lot of the boys who are effeminate may well turn out to be gay. But instead of just accepting these kids as they are and being like, you're a girl who likes stereotypical boy things, or you're a boy who likes pink or likes dresses or wants to be a ballerina, instead of being like, that's fine, you're like, well, you must have the wrong body, then we should fix that. Like, it's such a
Yeah.
regressive movement. These are ideas that feminists fought against for so long in the 70s, and really we won that. When I was a kid in the 80s and then in the early 90s, I didn't feel like there's anything wrong with me that I didn't like girl stuff. I was kind of proud of that.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean the worst of it, there's lots of, harsh things that I've been through as a result of speaking out, including, of course, loss of job opportunities and income and things like that. I don't really see that as a loss because I love my work, despite the fact that it isn't super lucrative. I feel that I have freedom in my work,
Right.
and I get to do what I want to do, and I get to talk to all these interesting people. So I think it's awesome. But it's hurtful to lose friends and to see people that saying horrible things about you online. Because you're trying to fight back against something that I think is a really destructive. I think it's clear that this has been a very destructive ideology, and that these policies are incredibly dangerous. They endanger girls, they endanger women. We are seeing women be sexually assaulted and sexually harassed in prison. These are the most vulnerable, most marginalized people, arguably, in all of Canada, having to share jail cells with rapists and murderers, baby rapists. Like you said, girls are being forced to accept grown men in their change rooms. women and girls are losing opportunities in sport. Again, something that feminists fought so hard for women and girls to be able to compete on fair ground, and for there to just be girls and women's sports, and for there to be funding for that, and that to be supportive, so that, girls can feel empowered in those areas and not be left out. And now, we're seeing 5 or 6 men on the girls volleyball team in Ontario, and they're getting all the play time because obviously they're better
Yeah.
than the girls. Um, and yeah, so that's hard. I have lost lots of friends over the years over this stuff. People in Vancouver, of course,
Right.
not
Yeah.
people in my life now.
Hmm. Oh, I know.
This is just Vancouver
Yeah.
people. And most of them, I don't even think most of them had very impassioned views about
No.
transgenderism. Maybe some of them did, but a lot of them, I think, just were getting harassed by their friends and caved to that. Like, oh, well, my friend doesn't like that I'm friends with Meghan Murphy, so she's bad. She's
Right.
making my life hard because now I have to deal with my friend harassing me about this, so I can't be friends with her. It's so pathetic and
Yeah.
juvenile. It's like,
Yeah.
you're an adult. Like, you're what, you're 35, 40 years old, and you can't handle, you're succumbing to you're caving to your shitty little high school friend who's bullying you because you're friends with Meghan Murphy, and people on the internet say Meghan Murphy's a transphobe.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and then of course it's been scary, every time I do an event, it's really scary. It's really stressful doing events. I
Yeah.
felt like I lost 10 years off my life this September because we did three events over on Vancouver Island, and we lose venues. The cops refuse to protect us, refuse to engage with us, and refuse to show up. So it's scary. We don't have money. We don't have a lot of money, so it's not like we have the money to
Yeah.
hire expansive security teams. We do always have to hire security, and we were lucky on the island to have a lot of volunteers helping us out, men and
Yeah.
women from the freedom movement who were just so amazing and hardworking and brave. But it's scary. I always think something bad might happen, and it's, on top of the stress of having to do public speaking, being scared that somebody might attack you while you're doing that public speaking
Right.
really
Yeah.
does add to the stress of that. So, and yeah, and I sometimes feel guilty that, people associated with me are gonna get, trans activists won't just go after the person speaking out, but they'll go after everyone around them.
Yeah.
They'll go after everyone that you work with. They'll go after your family members. They'll harass your kids.
Yeah.
They have no shame, and they have no ethics, and they're totally self-righteous in what they're doing. But I mean, I was proven right.
Yeah.
Like, people acted like and other women experienced this as well. Of course, it was hysterical, or, why are you making a big deal out of this? Back when I testified against the gender identity legislation at the Senate in 2017, and I was sort of desperately trying to publish anything and push back against Bill C-16 when it came up in 2016, and almost nobody would publish me or engage me, and I knew that it would be bad, and nobody was paying attention, and nobody really wanted to even talk about it.
Mm.
And now look at where we are.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that people are finally realizing what's going on and pushing back. But it's, of course, also it's frustrating, because if we had pushed back then, we could have stopped it. And now things have gone so far out of control that it's really hard to roll back.
Yeah. So what do you make of, Justin Trudeau walking out of, the chamber a couple of weeks ago, and he seems all disheveled, and does his best substitute drama teacher passionate voice to talk about what a tragedy it is that's unfolding in Alberta, and how trans kids are now threatened by this conservative. They make it sound like hillbillies with shotguns are driving down the street hunting down trans kids, right? Like for you, knowing what you know, when you see that, what goes through your mind?
Well, I mean, Trudeau is such a massive phony. everything he says is a performance. So I think I think what he's capable of being angry about is that he's being challenged. I don't
Right.
know that he's super concerned about kids who identify as transgender. I think that he just can't stand that any Canadian would challenge his policies and views. We saw exactly what went down when people tried to organize to push back against his unconstitutional mandates during COVID, and he behaved like a dictator and invoked the Emergencies Act illegally to punish and arrest and freeze the bank accounts of dissidents, peaceful Canadians who were fighting for their constitutional rights,
Yeah.
as we have the right to do in Canada, supposedly. He's, but the reversals are amazing, because the people who are pushing back against this now mainly are families.
Right.
They're like, it's the freedom people. The freedom movement has taken on this fight, which I love, because the freedom movement, the freedom convoy, the trucker convoy was the most inspiring thing I've ever seen happen in Canada in my lifetime.
Yeah, it was.
And
Yeah, it was the biggest, I think it was the most important civil rights movement ever to happen in our country. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean
for
to interrupt.
sure.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I had lost hope in Canada. I left. I moved to Mexico, for fear of my safety, both because of, I didn't feel safe on account of having been so outspoken on the trans issue. I was followed around my neighborhood by Morgane Auger, who's a well-known trans activist. I've been screamed at and threatened in public. I just did not feel safe walking around in my neighborhood, walking my dog. And then I had been speaking out against the COVID response and the mandates and Justin Trudeau's policies. And what I saw coming down the pike was that I was worried that I wouldn't be able to work, that I would be criminalized, that I would be trapped in Canada. So I left, and I'm so glad I did, in part because I'm happier living in Mexico. I'm happier having a community and being around people who do value freedom and who aren't scared of each other to the point where they
Yeah.
won't tell even their partners what they really think. Never mind their friends. And people who are just, people in Vancouver live in a bubble. Like, they
Yeah.
live in an ideological and political bubble, and they think that they're so much more worldly and more educated than everybody else. They think everybody else is ignorant, but in reality, they're ignorant. In reality, they've been ingesting propaganda for years and have no idea what's real and what's not real. And they trust their government, and they shouldn't trust their government. And most people that I knew in Vancouver bought the narrative around the convoy that these were dangerous terrorists and white supremacists and Nazis and misogynists and racists and everything else that they were called. And the rest of us knew. It's funny that I would know more about the reality of the situation from Mexico than people actually living in Canada, but I wasn't mainlining CBC propaganda.
Right.
And so, yeah, I forgot where I was going with
No,
this.
that's okay, because I wanted to actually, no, I know you got to run and you got to be in a call in 5 minutes here, but for myself, for people who don't know Vancouver or really even Canada, I the town that I'm from is Richmond. It's the south side of Vancouver, and I was in a little fishing village which is part of the town, called Steveston. And
Right.
I wasn't allowed to go into a restaurant with my wife and children. Therefore, we were out at the park one day, and I had to go into the restaurant, buy takeout, and then stand in the park with my wife and children while people in the restaurant sat in the windows and watched us eat in the park. And it started to rain. And I was like, fuck this place. I'm done. That's it. We're finished here.
Gross.
Like, yeah, it was like, just as a husband and a father, it was the lowest I ever felt. Right. And
Is
because
this because you guys weren't vaxxed?
yeah, that's right. Because I made a
Yeah.
choice for my family, because I did the reading. I read
Yeah.
the journals, and I read the information that was available. I didn't like what I saw, and I made a choice as a man to abstain from a medical experiment that now, in retrospect, I am so grateful I didn't allow my wife or my children to partake in. Not allow, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And our original response was to go to Costa Rica. We were like in the process of selling everything, and at the time we had the vaccine mandates in place. So for us, it was just, were we prepared to never see our families again, right? And my mother-in-law was just finishing up cancer treatment, and it was like, we might need to actually get back here. So Alberta was the next best bet. And my thought was, well, if shit goes bad and things hit the fan here, at least we're in a place where the fighters are. At least, I'm not in BC where everybody just rolls over and dies the moment they're told to. So we didn't even talk about the collapse of Canadian media, which was exactly what I wanted to talk to you about
Yeah,
today.
we can talk. I'm just gonna email. Sorry, I'll email her right now and just
Sure,
say that
yeah,
I'm a
I
bit
got I got
behind.
I got 15 minutes until everybody walks in here and the doorknob starts to jiggle and my 6-year-old demands to be seen and heard. So um I wanted to
Hold on.
talk to you about that because the Canadian legacy media is failing like fast, despite all of the tax dollars that the Trudeau Liberals have poured into them. And it's I mean, it's sad and it's funny at the same time that, same drugs and Brave New Normal. I wrote it on X, but I actually kind of meant it. I mean, we might be the new Canadian mainstream media soon because all of these networks are dying.
I just think it's I mean, it's a great time to be an independent media maker, an independent writer, an independent podcaster. And I'm not saying that because, it's not, oh, I'm thrilled that journalists are losing their jobs or not. But, the reality is these journalists were not doing their jobs.
Right.
And the mainstream is failing for a reason, and they should fail. They sold lies to the Canadian public. They sold government propaganda to the Canadian public, and they did not do their jobs as journalists and reporters. And that's people don't trust the mainstream media anymore, and for good reason. Nobody should trust the mainstream media. I mean, you shouldn't necessarily trust anybody blindly. What I've done for many years is to read all sorts of different sources. I might read an article in the CBC, and then I might check an article at Rebel News, and then I might check what they've published on Reddit even, and we'll see what people are saying online, and then I'll look to, Trish Wood, or, I'm talking in a Canadian context, in an American context. We've got a billion people that we can listen to. But and that's how you sort of try to get at the truth. And by using your own brain and critical thinking and research skills and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's we can't do the job of these huge media conglomerates as little people, but we can do a lot. And I think that we've done a lot more than the mainstream media has, especially when we're looking at what happened during COVID. And in terms of covering the convoy, and in terms of covering stories like the Coots 4, because the mainstream media and these mainstream reporters and journalists really were not allowing for any dissent. And we were all being, I mean, I don't know what happened to you, but I was like shadow banned and dinged on YouTube, shadow banned on Meta, on Facebook for pushing back against the COVID response and the mandates. And we know how many people were censored and silenced by Twitter before Elon Musk took over. I was banned by Twitter for 4 years until Elon bought the platform. But we have a kind of freedom and an ability to do something brave and powerful, because we aren't going to lose our jobs. We're dependent on our audience, at least for now, as long as we can function within like a subscription-based model and have people who are donating to us. That's how I survive. I've always survived almost entirely through donations from readers and listeners. And again, it's not, I'm not rich by any means. Make less than probably everybody that I know, most people I know. But I don't have fear of telling the truth, and I don't have
Yeah.
fear of saying something that will get me in trouble. I don't have fear of being canceled. Um, and I think that is more than most people in Canada can say. I think a lot of people, not just people working in media, people who are working in all sorts of areas, anyone who's in a union, I'm sure is always terrified of saying the wrong thing if they are a dissident, if they don't believe in gender identity ideology. Um, and for sure, those who rejected the vaccine, I had friends and family who rejected the vaccine and were out of work for 3 years as a result.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think, Justin Trudeau also did a dramatic performance in response to all the recent layoffs at Bell Media, and talked about how, this meant that democracy was dying.
Isn't
And
it so? It's just so
I just
fucking,
couldn't believe it.
oh,
I
it's
couldn't. I was
musical
like,
to
the
me.
nerve.
It's musical to me.
Democracy.
Like it's poetic to me, right?
Oh.
Because as I pointed out in a post that, you know, got a lot of visibility, is that this is the result of his own policy, right? This is the result of the fact that he used Canadian media to become a propaganda networks for him
Yeah.
ever since he was elected. It didn't even start during the pandemic. It started in 2015, and CBC was always government funded, but
Mm-hmm.
the Trudeau Liberals extended their tentacles literally into every network in Canada. And
Mm-hmm.
so Canadian tax dollars started subsidizing these networks. And as a result, they became propaganda networks. And as a result, Canadians stopped paying attention. And now they're dying. And Bell Media is laying off, I don't know how many thousands of people as a result of his policy, as a result of Canadians not tuning in. It's the
Yeah.
natural course of things. And
And
see, this
because he
is,
tried to control the narrative and tried to
yeah,
control what people had access to so that he could further inject them with propaganda and prevent them from seeing anything that challenged the narratives that he wanted them to see.
that's right. And excuse me, this is all their own, like the beauty in it all is that it's his own doing. And
Yeah.
I don't even mean him, because I honestly don't even really believe he's the one in charge. I believe I believe he's at least partially clinically retarded, right? Like that, like, and I mean that, right? Like he's not that bright of a guy. I actually think Christopher Freeland is the one who's pulling the strings and making some of the
Oh,
calls
okay.
there.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
my belief. I don't have any proof for it. It's just speculation, but he's just not that bright, and so he gives this, he throws this temper tantrum in front of the cameras, pretending to care about all these jobs, which he doesn't. What he cares about is the fact that his own policy's backfiring and he's forced to eat shit
Totally.
on television, right? But now we're in this strange position where Canadian legacy media is like dead. I mean, it's dead. I mean, I'm sure if you were to look at the numbers,
Yeah.
Joe Rogan would be the number one most watched channel in Canada, period, easily, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I
CBC,
think so too.
I think Joe Rogan does in a day what CBC does in a year,
Totally.
right? But now we're on this path to like, right? I mean, I'm almost betting.
All of their efforts to vilify him and turn him into this far right. Again, they use all
Yeah,
the same words to describe anybody who disagrees with them, regardless of who they are, what they say. Far right, misogynist,
I know.
transphobe, monster. And they always try to turn him into this like dummy, and he's not a dummy. He's an incredibly intelligent, really highly ethical. He's a
Yeah.
really good man. And all of their efforts to make him look stupid and accuse him of taking horse dewormer and being this kind of meathead failed. No one cares. Nobody, they're the ones that everybody
Yeah.
hates and mistrusts and thinks are liars and dum-dums, and they're just all still listening to Rogan.
I know.
It's
Well,
hilarious.
the beauty about it all is that it's all backfiring, right? I mean, you look at the popularity of Trump. Every time they attack, they hit him with another lawsuit or another set of charges, he just surges in the polls. I mean, at this point in time, it's like why are we doing this? Just give him the trophy and let him be president for the next 4 years. Because unless they do something drastic, he is going to be the next president of the United States, right? And so it's like,
And
yeah,
they just did everything in their power to stop it. I
it's so
mean,
crazy,
they
right?
tried to put him in jail.
But it's just because they're so, and the thing is it's so transparent now, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you can see everything they're doing, and you're just like I sit there sometimes and I'm like, I thought you had better tricks than this. You know what I mean? Like, you guys brainwashed us and propagandized us for decades.
Yeah.
Fucking decades you had us. What happened? Did all of you suddenly become stupid, or is it just the fact that Joe Rogan exists? Right. And Jimmy Dore and all of the other, really big names out there, and same drugs with Meghan Murphy. Like, is it just the fact that these people are doing this now that we're starting to understand what the real world is composed of, and we realize that you're all just manufacturers, making up a reality.
I think the spell was broken, particularly during COVID. And I think once the spell is broken, you won't fall under the spell again. Once you see what these outlets and these people are doing and what they're willing to do, you're not just going to go back to trusting them.
Right.
It's the same thing that happens with an individual. If your partner breaks trust, it's very hard, if not impossible, to rebuild that trust.
Right.
You can have the trust to begin with, I think, pretty easily, but once you destroy it, it doesn't come back. And if it does, I think it takes a lot of and years of work. And the politicians destroyed that, and the media destroyed that in Canada, and the elite class destroyed that by lying to people over and over and over and over again, lying about the masks, lying about the vaccines, lying about the lab leak theory, lying about the convoy. And we all know the truth now. Many of us knew the truth while it was happening, but at least now we all see the truth.
Yeah.
And we know that they were just publishing lies and government propaganda. Nobody's going to go back to believing them again.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I got one last question before I let you go to your call, because I feel like I'm keeping you forever.
Oh, it's okay.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, the freedom movement is still going strong. I'm excited. I wrote this on Twitter just last night, is I'm excited to go back to Canada for the first time in years. Because of those people that I connected with from the freedom movement on the island. We're trying to do some more gender identity events over on the island again, hopefully this spring. I'm so inspired by these people who've really banded together across Canada despite all sorts of differences. These are all just regular people. It's
Right.
not like these people came together because they all voted for the same political party or shared all the same ideology about everything. They value freedom, they care about Canada, they care about their constitutional rights, they want to do what's right, and they're brave and they're willing to fight and willing to be, unfortunately, thrown in jail. Again, the Coots Four, there's still two of those guys sitting in prison. They kept those men in prison for 2 years, essentially because they participated in the convoy. And the fact that there's this many brave people in Canada really willing to stand up to the government and stand up to the media, the cops, big pharma, all of these powerful, powerful, powerful entities. That movement isn't going away. Like I said, this movement is now taking on the gender identity issue. They're joining in solidarity with the farmers in Europe. They're going to fight for farmers in BC and Canada. They're fighting for our sovereignty, right? And so I think that's where we go. I think we stand in solidarity with the freedom movement, and we all get together and we fight, because there are more of us than there are of them. They can't, I always thought, I mean, when I refused to get a vax card, or I refused to get vaccinated, when I refused to participate in all of that stuff, it wasn't just because I was worried about what that medication would do to me. I didn't know, so I didn't want to be bullied into doing it when we didn't know anything about it. And I don't like being told what to do. But it's also about, well, if we all go along, then that's where we are.
Yeah.
If we push back, then we win. We have to push back, not just for ourselves, but for other people. I remember a lot of people, friends, things like that. People still say this to me now, that acting like I was being selfish by leaving Canada and going to Mexico, by refusing to get ArriveCan, by refusing to go along with the vax mandates, by refusing to put a mask on, all this stuff. They're like, oh, just because you don't want to do it, you're being selfish. Like, just help everybody else. And I'm like, this is what I'm doing to help everybody else. This doesn't really
Right.
affect me. Like,
Right.
but beyond the fact that I want to live with myself and I want to be happy and live
Right.
free. But like, it wasn't the COVID lockdowns didn't really have that negative of an impact on me. I
No.
didn't lose my job. I was, I was living relatively comfortably, although I was depressed because I wanted to live my life and hang out with my friends and go to the pool. But it's about sticking up for everybody's
Yeah.
rights,
Yeah.
and everybody's freedom. And all these people were suffering and being fired and losing their businesses and being vilified. So those are the people that we stand with. And that's always been what my fight was about. I didn't fight back against gender identity ideology because it had any effect on me at all. It
Yeah.
hasn't. I don't have a kid. I'm not, I'd never had a negative encounter with a trans identified person at that point. It was about what I knew would happen and was worried about what would happen to all women and girls everywhere. And because you have to stand up for reality and you have to stand up for what's right. And I think all the people who were accusing us of being selfish for refusing the mandates and pushing back, those people were all selfish. Those people
Yeah.
just didn't want to rock the boat and wanted to protect their status in social circles and whatnot, and didn't want to have, we're like, oh, if I just go along, everything's going to be okay for me. And in
Yeah.
my home, I want to protect my stuff.
Yeah.
And what the convoy did was, everybody who participated in the convoy and supported the convoy took a huge risk in doing so. And now they're brave, and now those people are emboldened, and those people are courageous people, and they're not going to stop pushing
Yeah.
back.
I know it's amazing how a fringe minority can stop watching legacy media and all of a sudden they're shutting their doors. Hey,
It's just
so
a
much
few
for that.
of us. What
Just
happened?
just 10 of us. Um, Meghan Murphy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to talk to you again. I have so many other points that I wanted to touch on, but we just kind of went in one direction. And just so you know, tractors have started rolling in the Cowichan Valley in BC, so we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, I saw that. So I'm excited to go back and connect with those people and learn more about what's happening there. But yeah, I have been following that story also, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Um, so hang around for like 10 seconds after we're done recording. We'll say goodbye privately. But in the meantime, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes. You can find my writing and podcast and all sorts of other stuff at www.meghanmurphy.ca. That's my Substack, and I appreciate paying subscribers. I appreciate all subscribers, but if you become a paid subscriber, that helps me a lot in terms of being able to work, and I really appreciate that support. I'm back on Twitter at Meghan E. Murphy. I'm on Instagram at Meghan Emily Murphy. They don't really let me into the algorithm much over there, but I'm there. But yeah, and you can find my podcast, The Same Drugs, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all of those places. But yeah, I mean, because of the way that big tech and these social media platforms work and their ability to keep people in and keep people out based on what they say and the kinds of topics they cover, I think the best place to keep up with me is on Substack. It's an actual free thinking platform that supports free speech and doesn't mess around with you if you engage in wrong think. So
All right.
That's my favorite place.
Well, it's one of mine too. Yourself, Sam Cooper, and a handful of others are all part of my morning reading. So,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
it's
Thank
really
you.
nice to talk to you. And I know you're from the '90s because you still say www dot, which is awesome. So,
I don't know why I got into that. I started saying that for my website for I don't even remember why, but I guess
thanks,
because I'm
Megan.
from the 90s.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks for your time today, Megan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. Thanks so much for having me.